Are Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates buying influence in the White House? The Saudi Crown Prince is reported to have boasted that he has Donald Trump's son-in-law in his pocket. And leaked documents allege a major fundraiser for the president was offered business deals from the Gulf to influence U.S. policy. This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Jane Dutton. While Mohammad bin Salman continues his two-week tour of the United States, the Saudi Crown Prince is being accused of using classified intelligence from the US president's daily briefing in his crackdown on dissent back home. The Intercept online publication says the source was Donald Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner. He's reported to have revealed names of Saudis disloyal to the Crown Prince, and at least one of them may have been tortured. Kushner's legal team denies any such discussion. His top secret clearance that allowed him to access the president's daily brief was taken away last month. Also in the spotlight, Elliot Broidy, a leading fundraiser for Trump with business interests in the UAE. The New York Times says he was pushing the White House to dismiss Rex Tillerson, the US Secretary of State, who was fired last week. And the paper says Broidy wanted an aggressive stance on Iran and Qatar. He's accused Qatar of hacking his emails, a charge Qatar denies. Leaked documents reveal close coordination between Broidy and George Nader, a Lebanese-American businessman and an advisor to the United Arab Emirates. Nader is reported to have organized a summit of 5 Arab leaders in 2015. 4 of them joined the blockade against Qatar last June. Nader has reportedly been questioned by Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team about his ties to the UAE. US media reports indicate Mueller's looking into whether the UAE tried to buy influence in the White House. Let's bring in our guests. On set with me is Mahjoob Zweiri, Director of the Gulf Studies Center at Qatar University. From Washington, D.C., by Skype, is Khalil, Jahshan, Executive Director, Arab Center of Washington. And from Florence, also by Skype, is Afshin, Shahi, Senior Lecturer of Middle East Politics at University of Bradford. Thank you all for joining us. I know it's still early there, Khalil, Jahshan, but I'm just wondering how this is reverberating or how this is likely to reverberate.
I think the information that was released by the Intercept is worrisome, and I hope that it will get the attention it deserves. First, I think with regards to the nature of the Saudi-American relationship, I think this information shows that this new, if you will, transactional Machiavellian character of the relationship, both sides using each other, Trump on one hand saying we put our man on top, and bin Salman claiming to have Kushner in his pocket. That kind of moves the relationship actually from 75 years of mutual interest to kind of mutual manipulation in 2018. But the most serious element, I think, that will most probably generate some serious attention is the Kushner leak. Again, basically, who authorized the leak? Was it Kushner on his own? Was it based on the president's instruction to share that information regarding some U.S. traditional friends who ended up being enemies of MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, and who ended up being either dismissed from office or penalized or tortured or imprisoned as a result of that information. So there will be, I guarantee you, some investigation of what did this leak entail.
Mahjoob Zweiri, your comments about this potentially explosive and damaging information?
I mean, what's being released today or what's being leaked is telling us very important facts. I think I'm saying fact because in the late Barack Obama administration, there was a lot of debate about why the Saudis and the Emiratis are upset of Barack Obama administration and why they are looking for a Republican president in the White House. And that was, at that time, speculation that how those two countries in particular will be looking at the elections. We know that they are not in favor of Clinton because of her call for democracy and the human rights, and also praising Al Jazeera in many of her statements. And I think Trump was a better choice for the two countries.
We've always been fans of Republicans. Anyway.
Absolutely. So historically, the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the Republicans was an important issue when it comes to the American-Saudi relations. So I think there is a puzzle, and I think we are now getting the piece of this puzzle every day from report there and some part of the news here. And I think what we are finding that there is a determination, well-planned view on how to deal with the situation in the region, including Iran. Iran, we know that the Saudis are not happy with the deal, and I think they were not happy of Barack Obama's foreign policy towards Iran. And they did not deny that. They said in public that Barack Obama was in favor of Iran. And I think they wanted the president in the White House who actually against Iran. Trump was the person who was against Iran. And I think all of this together tell us that there is sort of plan, there is sort of a vision on how to deal with the situation after Barack Obama. And I think if we look at the campaign of Trump and the leaking today about the fundraisers and all of this, this tells you that there is also sort of a preparation on how to deal with the situation in the White House and to bring the person who you can work with and can defend the interest of the two countries. And that's what we are seeing now, at least since last year, starting the blockade of Qatar.
Afshin, Shahi, how are you reading these developments, this latest expose? And do you think what we are seeing, and Mahjoob touched on it here, is that American foreign policy is reverting back to what the Republicans really want, the access to oil, pushing Iran away, getting closer to Saudi Arabia?
I completely agree with Mahjoob. And for that reason, I believe that this is actually a very dark day and a very dark moment for American democracy. Just like the thought of that, an American advisor, the son-in-law of the president, taking some intelligence, and we still don't know if it was with the authorization from the president or not. Regardless of that, taking some sensitive information, flying to Saudi Arabia and passing these sensitive information about who is loyal and who is not loyal to the new Saudi crown prince in a country that has one of the worst human rights records in the Middle East, and then seeing the severe consequences of basically that action. We know at least a number of people have been tortured, a number of people have been arrested, a number of people have lost their wealth and property, at least partly because of that intelligence swapping. The idea that actually somebody using American intelligence for his own financial benefit, for his own personal benefit, I think is a very, very, very sad and at the same time tragic news for American democracy. And apart from the Saudi context, I think the world has been completely preoccupied, for example, about the role of Russia and the ways in which Russia has been interfering in American democracy. And they have been completely ignoring the role of new lobbying groups, primarily dominated by United Arab Emirates. Since 2008, when Mr. Otaiba became the ambassador to Washington, D.C., effectively, he changed the traditional Arab approach to gaining influence in Washington, D.C. Traditionally, basically, Arab states try to kind of approach the big, powerful figures in the White House or the State Department or Pentagon to buy influence. But actually, he replicated kind of the pro-Israeli kind of lobbying group, primarily AIPAC. Instead of primarily focusing on powerful group, Mr. Otaiba started to have an influence in the prevailing discourse in Washington, D.C. He started to have investment in various think tanks. He started to buy the loyalty of various journalists and various media organizations.
Okay,
And
let me put this to Mahjoob, if I may. I mean, if you look at how wide that net was thrown before the elections, if this all comes out that it has been proved that Russia was involved, the UAE was involved, Facebook and the data hacking there, I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? The sort of people that were brought to the table in order to get into power.
I think the end of Barack Obama administration or presidency was a happy moment to a lot of players, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, and those basically who did not believe that Barack Obama foreign policy was helpful to them. And I think what we are, as I mentioned, the preparation, the plan, the communication with influential, media and research centers, the money which being paid to different individuals or entities, all of this together tell us that that there was sort of reason for that, and the reason I see it is to redirect the White House toward their own interest and definition of the region and the interest of the region. I think there was sort of determination that the era of Barack Obama should be ended and there should be something their own favor, helping their own interest. And I think if you see since Trump came to power, all of his foreign policy, the first visit he has done was to Riyadh. All of his, the tweets about, how much he's happy of Saudi Arabia foreign policy, and he was proud of King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammad bin Salman, and had all praising them. All of this again taking us to the point that the Republicans and this president in particular, he was seeing Saudi Arabia as a strong and a better alliance to the region to achieve his goal, whether financially, because he wanted the money of Saudi Arabia, as he mentioned 2 days ago, that they can help the United States to creating jobs. And also he wanted Saudi Arabia because of the Arab-Israeli conflict and the deal of the century, as they call it, and how they want Saudi Arabia to play an important role of a final resolution to the Arab-Israeli conflict. So he needs Saudi Arabia and Emirates, they need the United States, and I think they put all of this effort to make sure that it leads to achieve their goals.
Khalil, to that end, are we seeing a sort of whitewashing of Saudi Arabia now in the United States? And I refer back to that rather sycophantic CBS interview where Mohammed bin Salman wasn't challenged on the atrocities committed in Yemen, the human rights abuses committed in the country, just a few subjects that should have been tackled. Do you think that is what we're seeing at the moment? We've also had Donald Trump praising the good relationship when it comes to arms deals, rather than noting, and why would he, that these arms are being used in places like Yemen to commit those atrocities.
I do. It's quite clear that the bilateral relationship between Riyadh and Washington is changing, and is changing for the negative in that direction, actually, as you just described. What I referred to earlier as this mutual manipulation, to me, it was embarrassing as a long-term observer of this relationship over the past 30 plus years. To see that short meeting between Trump and MBS focusing on these charts, pictures of weapon systems. I mean, is this what this strategic relationship is all about? So this Machiavellian, I think, component is not totally new, but it seems to have all of a sudden colored the relationship, controlled the relationship all over. So traditionally, we got accustomed to what was referred to earlier, this special relationship where you have the top executive in Riyadh and the top executive here in Washington dealing with each other. So if you look traditionally at the history of the relationship, it was the king dealing with the president, the way it was in the days, with Abdullah and with Fahd and others. And on this side, going back to Reagan, and Bush, both Bushes and so on, where the relationship was totally focused at the highest level. Now we have this new level of manipulation by a lower level basically advisor to the president, who happens to be his son-in-law, who is being manipulated by others. So I see it personally as a devaluation, frankly, of the relationship between both sides.
And Afshin, a real capture of the White House.
Yes, and it was very interesting that over the last few months, the White House constantly has been kind of praising MBS over his kind of very progressive social policies. And at the same time, the White House has been completely indifferent about so many other issues that have been facing Saudi Arabia, or certainly the policies which have been championed by MBS, which have been kind of embarrassing, at least in every sense of the term. It wasn't that long ago when the prime minister of a sovereign country was effectively arrested and put on the house arrest in Saudi Arabia. Here I'm referring to the Lebanese the prime minister, who was effectively arrested in Saudi Arabia, and yet the United States didn't say anything and didn't actually do anything. And yet they using this golden opportunity at the moment, which is, as you guessed it, which is creating an opportunity or a platform for deeper ties between Saudi Arabia and the United States, in my opinion, to primarily use this opportunity for their personal gain. I don't think it is necessarily about national interest, because after all, we heard that Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia in order to secure some very good deals for the American economy. Only a few days after signing all those contracts and documents, we realized that they were not after all real contracts. They were basically the letters of intent. And at the same time, we know that Mr. Kushner personally played a very, very important role to persuade Mr. Trump to use and choose Saudi Arabia as the first country to visit.
Can I pick up what you touched on, how it hasn't succeeded on many levels, and how, Mahjoob, it's backfired when it comes to Iran, for example? I mean, if we talk about the bigger picture here, the blockade on Qatar, which pushed Qatar closer to Iran, we see Iran growing in strength in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq. I mean, that has a negative impact, as we know, on Saudi Arabia, because that drives so much of its foreign policy.
At least so far, none of the aims or none of the goals of Saudi Arabia has been achieved. The war in Yemen is draining the economy of Saudi Arabia, and they are now forced to have a behind-the-door negotiation with the Houthis, as been reported last week. When it comes to Iran, of course, Trump is complicating the whole deal now, and he's promising that the United States will withdraw from the deal by mid of April if the Europeans are not serious about reviewing the whole deal or including the missile program of Iran. But still, Iran is enjoying the moment by saying that still I have Europeans on board. They are believing on the deal. They're defending the deal. So Iran is still feel confident that the deal is still strong and there is support for the deal. When it comes to the other files, actually the Americans were absolutely not in the scene. I mean, in Syria, Russia on board, and Iraq, the Americans, they have very minimum role, especially with the small military forces in Iraq. As I mentioned, Yemen, the same case. So actually, in the last, since Trump came to power, we saw there's limited role of the Americans on those files, the roles of others, and Saudi Arabia is losing more on those files, actually.
So, Khalil, the US might have Saudi Arabia on its side, but I should imagine that the US really needs to tread very carefully when it comes to Iran, because if Donald Trump does what he wants to do and scrap the deal eventually, where will it leave his European partners? Where will it leave Russia? What sort of action will it provoke Iran to do, and what sort of spin-off will that have on Saudi Arabia? Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has already said that they will nuke up if Iran is seen to do that.
I think what is important in this formula is the fact that both sides are trying to manipulate each other. I'm talking about Riyadh and Washington on the other hand, to achieve irreconcilable, actually, objectives with regards to Tehran. Even though the conventional wisdom is that there is harmony right now in the objectives vis-a-vis Iran. I don't think so. I think the Saudis are trying to use the Americans, if you will, to stem or put an end to the expansion of influence that was referred to earlier by Iran in excursions into Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, and so on. The U.S. has not been and will not be interested, for all kinds of internal reasons, to do, if you will, the bidding for Saudi Arabia. It wants Saudi Arabia to do the work which it's not willing to do or capable of doing at this time, while the U.S. would give it the logistic support, but not necessarily to become a party to these conflicts. So the desire on the part of the Mohammed bin Salmans of this world to have the U.S. Take the broom and the dustpan and clean up in the Gulf is not going to happen at all. So the expectation is, I think, far-fetched.
Afshin, let's go back to these revelations, the broily, the nada, what we have heard Kushner is allegedly up to. What sort of impact is that likely to have on the U.S. administration now, the White House, Donald Trump, when it comes to the geopolitics in this region? Will he be weakened? Where does it leave the Robert Mueller investigation?
I think we still have to wait for the result of the inquiry. But as I mentioned early on, this is, a very sad moment for American democracy, and it is scandalous in every sense of the term. I think everybody knew that both Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates using the existing situation in Washington, D.C., and the new White House and the new president to broaden their kind of influence in Washington. But this level of interference and effectively buying influence or potentially bribing powerful people close to the president for influence. I mean, this is a different kettle of fish. If the vote is absolutely galvanized about kind of the possible role of Russia in the recent American election, I think this scandal or this issue potentially can be way more significant and way more serious for American politics.
And also it makes you realize what we're seeing happening here in this region, it's just not going to end anytime soon.
There is lack of trust of this administration. I don't think so. They know they believe on that the American is sincere on finding solutions. The different dynamic in the administration, the changing of politicians, this actually makes things more complicated. I don't think so. This lack of trust will increase rapidly of the administration. And I think this will make most of the crisis actually on hold for maybe a long time, unfortunately.
All right, so where to from here? Khalil, what do you think we are likely to see, as I should imagine all sides scramble to lessen the negative impact of this?
Well, as far as the United States is concerned, I mean, the emphasis right now is internal. So regardless of what the ambitions are on the part of Kushner or even his father-in-law, that is not going to materialize soon. They have some serious challenges on their hands regarding their own behavior, the investigations facing them through the special prosecutor. If charges are filed against them, this administration is going to be totally paralyzed. And so they might try to use foreign policy here and there, including the Middle East, including the relationship with Saudi Arabia, to show that they are successful and they are bringing jobs, as the president tried to do in his meeting yesterday or earlier this week with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. But that's not going to convince people, in the sense that most Americans today are not looking and are not welcoming for any additional involvement in a conflict in the Middle East, whether it's Syria or whether it's Iran or Iraq or Yemen or what have you.
Okay, let's leave it there.
Chances are the administration will continue to bleed internally and to weaken.
Khalil, Jahshan, with those final words, thank you very much. Thank you very much as well to my other guests, Mahjoob, Zweiri and Afshin Shahi. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Jane Dutton, and the rest of the Inside Story team, thanks for watching.